The suited man returns to the hotel and runs into the client's little wolfdog. Broad shoulders and a narrow waist. A rare match to his taste. The man pins the little wolfdog down on the ground. Head down. Who would have thought he'd be pushed onto the bed by the wolfdog's strength? In an instant, the roles of attacker and defender switched. Rumor has it that the new wealthy executive of Group X, Liang, is not interested in women. Many people try to climb the social ladder. Many have secretly bribed others, but they've never succeeded. But at tonight's gathering, the chubby boss disagrees. The reason Liang Qiu wasn't swayed, that just means the gift didn't hit the right spot. So this time he prepared a special gift, and before leaving, he smiled and whispered in Liang Qiu's ear, "Mr. Liang, it was a pleasure working together. I hope tonight's gift suits your taste." Liang Qiu's eyelids lifted slightly, and upon entering his hotel room, he noticed something unusual, a pair of shoes that didn't belong to this room. A pair of size 43 men's leather shoes. Liang Qiu stared at the shoes for a moment. He lifted his foot and walked into the room. The room was quite clean. There wasn't any clutter. He looked around. He saw no one. Only the sound of water could be heard from the bathroom. He walked over and sat on the sofa. He reached up and loosened his tie, letting it hang loosely around his neck. He had unknowingly taken off his jacket and tossed it aside. Tonight, he had drunk more than usual. Liang Qiu felt a bit dizzy. He simply closed his eyes to rest, leaning back on the sofa, listening to the sound of water from the bathroom. His thoughts began to drift. So this is what the supplier meant by the gift. Liang Qiu glanced at the closed bathroom door. He couldn't help but laugh. Well, that's impressive. They sent a man directly. He was pondering how to send him away. Then, sounds came from the room. The bathroom door swung open. Liang Qiu opened his eyes. In an instant, he locked eyes with the person just out of the shower. The man stood not far away. His expression was not good. He wasn't sure if it was just his imagination. His face still bore the anger he hadn't yet concealed. When he saw her, his footsteps suddenly halted. He looked surprised. Liang Qiu's gaze fell on him, without a hint of concealment. He boldly scanned from head to toe. The one who had just showered was only wrapped in a towel. Broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Unwiped droplets slid down his smooth skin to the edge of the towel. "What kind of deal did they make with you?" After a long pause, Liang Qiu spoke with interest. He was quite curious. How much does it cost to get someone like this to do this? Liang Qiu looked into the man's eyes. His face still glistened with tears, as if he was holding something back. His fingers were clenched beside him. The pressure made his knuckles turn white. Song Boda stood there. He was suffering under the gaze of the man. His emotions were hidden behind his eyes. He never imagined such a lowly tactic would be used against him after all these years. But this was his new room. How did this man with such eyes end up here? Song Boda looked puzzled, and it seemed he misunderstood something. "I don't know. No one told me." Song Boda suppressed his confusion and replied. Upon hearing this, Liang Qiu nodded. No one spoke in the room. Silence fell once more. After a long time, Liang Qiu finally spoke, not sure if it was due to the alcohol. His voice had a slightly hoarse quality. He raised his eyes and hand toward him. His tone involuntarily carried a strong emphasis. Song Boda didn't move. He seemed to be pondering something. The atmosphere grew quiet. Only then did Liang Qiu look up at him again. After a while, he asked, "You're unwilling?" After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something. His expression darkened slightly. They actually brought someone who wasn't willing. In this circle, he's seen many similar things. Especially being in this position, facing all sorts of people. Some willingly do certain things. Naturally, some are forced and have no choice but to agree. Thinking of this, Liang Qiu's rare interest faded. He leaned back against the sofa again. He closed his eyes. He spoke coldly. "The door is over there. Get dressed and leave." Liang Qiu never forces anyone. Song Boda looked at the person sitting on the sofa. With his eyes closed, leaning there, he seemed impatient. His originally smooth shirt had wrinkles around the collar. His hair was a bit messy. Liang Qiu felt somewhat irritated. He hadn't heard any movement. Just as he was about to ask why he hadn't left, he opened his eyes to see a close-up face. He didn't say he was unwilling. Song Boda smiled lightly. "The boss is angry." Song Boda moved in closer. He could see the person in front of him more clearly. Every detail was just right. This was his first time seeing him up close. Liang Qiu opened his eyes. He spoke coldly. "But I'm no longer interested." "Not interested," Song Boda repeated with interest. He reached down and unbuckled his belt. His gaze fell on Liang Qiu's face. "Boss, what about now?" Liang Qiu's body stiffened. He never expected things would develop this way. The temperature gradually rose. Even steady breaths are starting to falter. He is still sitting there. He remains in the same position, unmoved. What he just said about losing interest is true. But now, the sensations rising within him make him restless and uneasy. After a long while, Liang Qiu finally moved. He grabbed that mischievous hand and pulled the person up. He bluntly threw out a remark. "Get up, over there. Things have developed to this point. Since he is willing, there's no need to hesitate then." Liang Qiu has never been someone to suffer in silence. The night deepens. All around is silence. Looking down from the floor-to-ceiling window, the entire nightscape of the city comes into view. The night breeze carries a hint of coolness, but the room is hot and stifling in contrast. By the bedside, Song Boda boldly reached between Liang Qiu's legs. A crisp metallic sound echoed in the quiet room. The belt fell. Liang Qiu raised his gaze, his deep gaze fixed on the person before him. Having been on top for so long, he inherently exudes a sense of predation. She reached out to grab his collar, forcing him to lower his head. His gaze swept over the other's lips. Even his breath was tightly wound like a storm, a kiss filled with a unique power between men. Liang Qiu pressed one hand on the shoulder of the person beneath him, his hands slick with sweat. It's hard to tell whose it is. Song Boda's eyes are rimmed with red. At that moment, a gap forced open. A thought flashed through Liang Qiu's mind. Setting aside the recent interlude, this person truly fits his taste perfectly. That face is just so enticing. He admits he is driven by desire. Though he has never had anyone by his side, he's not a complete novice either. He naturally knows what happens between two men. His thoughts are somewhat scattered, wondering how to maintain some boundaries, without causing harm to anyone. That thought abruptly ceased the moment he was pressed down. Liang Qiu went rigid all over. A powerful masculine presence loomed behind him, with an even stronger sense of predation. Her pupils dilated slightly, shouting, "What are you doing?" Song Boda shut his eyes, but the strength in his hands did not wane. Naturally, he wants to please the boss. For a moment, the two were locked in a stalemate.